Um, my personal favorite. Well, I don't so often like have the opportunity to explore just like whatever I want. There's often some sort of underlying theme that I think the
Oh, okay.
teachers would like to see. So there's normally some sort of requests. But whenever I do have a sense of agency in
Mhm.
seeing something, um, hmm, I actually don't really have this. I don't have a specific exhibit. I mean, it's probably more like favorite objects or objects that I already know fairly well that I feel more comfortable um,
Okay.
and like confident in my ability to engage students with more
Um,
so than any
could you give me
specific.
an example of one of those objects that you do feel comfortable with, or that you do enjoy explaining to students?
Yeah, sure. So there's an object called Winter Scene
Mhm.
and American Identities on the fifth floor,
Okay.
and that it's one of our sort of like seminal works from our American collections, and it's a landscape of or city scene of Brooklyn in the 1820s
Oh.
in the area that is now Dumbo, right across the Manhattan Bridge in Brooklyn.
Oh.
And so there's a variety of activities that we oftentimes do at at that painting. It's very conducive, like for drawing, or for doing a sound activity where you think about what's going on in the scene and what sounds might be made,
Mhm.
or think about acting out the scenes or thinking about what people are doing and then what they might be doing next. So it's very conducive for seeing narrative and also being able to describe what's going on in a variety of ways.
Mm. How do you scaffold, I guess, your museum tours to accommodate younger students or students with special needs? Or if there's anything that you do or don't, or anything.
Yeah. So I guess all of our tours are adjusted.
Mhm.
So when I'm creating a tour, oftentimes it could be the reverse. Like I create a tour for very young students, and then the next time I teach it, I have to adjust it for older students.
Mhm.
Um, some certain things that I tend to take into consideration when teaching younger students are their attention span.
Uh huh.
So even if you're looking at one work of art for an extended period of time, say like 15, 20 minutes,
Mhm.
you can still move through a variety of activities or ways of engaging or looking at an artwork in order to keep their minds um, busy and entertained while
Yeah.
still investigating one object.
Okay.
Um,
Usually for the
yeah.
tours, how many objects? I know your tours are like an hour long, or are they 45 minutes long? I don't know.
Um, yeah. So oftentimes when we teach school groups, they're in the museum for about an hour and 15 minutes
Okay.
if they arrive on time.
Uh-huh. I noticed that
um,
little part on the teacher resources, like, please be on time. If not, please call this number.
right. So oftentimes, I mean, they may arrive a few minutes late.
Mhm.
But then on the opposite end, sometimes they don't have to leave right after an hour and 15 minutes. So if the educator is willing to spend a few extra minutes, you could squeeze a few extra minutes in. So we have about an hour and 15 minutes to welcome everyone to the museum, take off their coats, get
Mhm.
settled, and then have an introduction to a lesson. So about the amount of time that we actually are able to look at objects or works of art is, I would estimate, maybe 45 minutes or so.
Okay.
Is the amount of time that we're actually exploring objects in the museum.
Okay.
And yeah, we normally go for about 3 objects within that period of time, so
Oh,
about 15 minutes at each object.
okay. I didn't know that. That's good information. Thank you. Um, do you have any, I guess, advice for teachers who are preparing or planning on going on a museum tour with their students? Like anything that you wish teachers knew about ahead of time at all?
And this is for teachers who are going, like, who would come for a museum tour with myself, or are they leading their own tour through the museum?
I guess with yourself, like if you're leading the tour, is there anything that you wish teachers would do ahead of time, or any advice, or just anything that, say, if I was going to plan a tour with you, um,
Hmm.
what should I do on my end to help you?
Help me. I'm going to keep that in the back of my head. Can I come back to that in a few
Oh
minutes?
yeah, of
Because I
course, of
think
course.
okay, there certainly is. I'd love to give
Mhm.
you an answer to that question, but I also don't just want to say something that I don't have
Oh yeah, of
a
course.
few moments to reflect on first. Uh,
um, how about, is there anything that you've learned from the students that you've worked with during your internship that you want to take with you to wherever you go next?
is there anything that I've learned from the students
Mhm.
working during my internship?
Yes.
Yes, yes, certainly. So I've been able to work with um, a wide range of ages from my internship. So my family program is for students 4 through 7 and an adult. My teen program is for teens, which I think is defined as something between like 13 or 14
Mhm.
through 18 or 19 or so, roughly.
Okay.
And then school groups that can be from kindergarten up through 12th grade, although it's normally more so elementary schools and then middle schools and then high schools. That's the order of, I think, frequency
Okay.
that school groups come to the museum. So, yeah, so I've been able to work with a wide variety of ages,
Mhm.
and I think just gaining more experience in terms of how to connect with each of those ages and like the type of language and questions that are appropriate to ask each of those ages
Oh yeah,
is
definitely.
really helpful. Yeah.
Okay. I guess let's do one more question because I know you probably have to go. I guess for, if have you visited the Kahinde Wiley or the notebook exhibit with any of your student groups at all?
I just went once for the first time. We looked at one of the paintings, so
Mhm.
not any of the notebooks, but one of the paintings in the exhibition.
Okay. Could
And
you talk about like what did you focus on in the painting, or what kind of activities you did with that?
hmm sure, so it was a first grade class, and the theme of their visit to the museum was learning to look.
Mhm.
So oftentimes what we do is um, use various ways of looking or observing a work of art um, in order to engage students. So
Mhm.
what I had them do at this painting was it's a fairly large painting, probably six, like 4 feet by 6 feet or so,
Oh.
and there's a lot of text and shapes and images um, within the artwork. So there's a lot going on.
Mhm.
And in order to help them start to break down like what they were seeing, I gave everyone a viewfinder, which is just a square piece of paper with a smaller square cut out in the
Oh,
center.
okay. Like a frame of sorts.
Right, right.
Mhm.
Like it's thicker paper, so I guess more like poster board of sorts.
Oh,
And
okay.
so they can use that in order to, look through, hold it with one hand and look through so that they can see just smaller portions of the painting at one time.
Mhm.
And they really enjoyed doing that. After letting them do that for a few minutes, I was like, okay, I'm going to come around and collect them in just a moment. But everyone was still looking so intently, and then I asked if they wanted to keep looking, if they could raise their hand, and almost everyone raised their hand.
Oh.
So so they really enjoyed looking through the viewfinder to in order to explore. I think it just makes it more fun to
Mhm.
be able to look at smaller parts. Um, but unexpectedly, from how that turned out, actually was that one of the more frequently recognized um, images in the painting
Mhm.
was that of a gun.
Oh.
and it was yeah, it was over like on the side of the painting, and it wasn't very noticeable, and it didn't really stand out to me.
Mhm.
There was a lot more going on in the painting, but for some reason that was what stood out to most students. And
Interesting.
so sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying that was interesting. Like, keep going.
Okay, yeah. So after looking with our viewfinders, we had a discussion about some of the things that we found, and a lot of the students were mentioning the gun, and then uh, how that sort of affected their interpretation of the painting. And so we thought about that, and then thought about some different ways, like some of the different senses that we could explore with this painting if
Mhm.
it were to make a sound, or if it were to have a taste, you know, those sorts of questions to get students thinking about um, different ways of interpreting what they were.
I guess that's mostly it for the questions that I had for you. I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to add.
Yes, I think going back to your question about um, what would be helpful, or like what advice
Oh,
I
for a
have for
teacher, yeah.
teachers who plan to bring their students
Mhm.
to the museum. Um, this, I mean, I'm sure this will vary depending upon the educator and who you ask, but for myself, I always find it very helpful when teachers have a formalized idea of what they want to see at the museum. So I think it's really helpful when I'll contact a teacher and they say, yes, I would like to take my student. We're learning about the history of the Revolutionary War. So if we could look at something that relates to that, but also, I know they're learning about, um, I don't know, like lines and shapes in their art classes. So if we could also, like, think about connecting that and how we could create a tour that touch on various things.
Okay, so like the more specific the teacher is with what they want, the better for you, kind of.
Right, right, right.
Mhm.
Yeah, sometimes I mean it can be very unhelpful to contact a teacher and they say, "Well, I just want to visit the museum with my class," and that's that's great. And like I don't think that's any reason not to come to the museum,
Mhm.
but um, and that certainly does give me more agency in doing whatever I would like to do. But um, I think the strongest tours are ones in which um, you're able to really connect with what students' prior knowledge.
Oh yeah.
So so if the teacher is able to communicate that, that's really helpful.
Okay.